Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're learning Maseches Yoma Daf Yud Zayin and Yud Ches. We are 2 lines down on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're coming off of the heels of a machlokes between the Mishnah in Maseches Tamid and the Mishnah in Maseches Midos. Quite similar Mishnayos, but one of them indicates that the location of the room of the Tlaim of where the animals were kept is in the northwest quadrant, and some say the southwest quadrant. We saw one answer yesterday. That is, one shita is Stam Mishnayos, and the other one is a shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, so it's not really a stira. And today we have an architectural response from the Gemara that says in the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, how do we deal with the discrepancy between the Mishnah and Tamid and the Mishnah and Midos, indicating that the room for the Tlaim where the animals were stored were in different locations. Says the Gemara 2 lines down, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Ravada Berei de Rabbi Yitzchak Omar, Hai Lishka Aktsuye Mekatzia. The Lishka, this room, actually extends the length of the western wall there. So it's in the northwest and the southwest. It's a very long room. It doesn't quite hit each wall, but it is particularly a long room. Ude'asi mitzafon, if you were to walk from the north, mischazi lebedarim, it looks like it was really on the southern side of the wall. Ude'asi midarim, and if you were to approach the room of the Lishkas Tlaim from the south, you would have thought that it was connected to the far northern wall, mischazi lebetzafon. So that's what the Gemara says, is you are confused as to whether or not the Lishkas Tlaim was in the northwest or the southwest. You're both right. And that's a different approach altogether. In the previous answer that we learned yesterday, we said it's just a machlokes in the Tanaim. Here we're saying there is no machlokes. It's all in the same location. And says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of the page, it's Zayin Amud Aleph. Mistabra, where was it actually anchored to? What wall was it actually anchored to? Says the Gemara, Mistabra and we have that we assume that it was on the southwestern wall. Southwestern is on the inside of the mikdash, and the northwestern was on the outside of the mikdash. So the southwestern wall was inside. Mimai. How do we know? Asks the Gemara. How do we know that this is the case? That in fact the Lishkas Tlaim was on the southwestern wall. So says the Gemara as follows. Yesterday, when we learned the Mishnah in Tamid, and when we learned the Mishnah in Midos, we may have overlooked something. I certainly did, and that is that there's actually a contradiction in regards to going around the quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you were to look back on Tezvavam Beis in the Mishnah, the first shita seems to say that there's Lishkas Tlaim, after that is a Lishkas Chosamos, after that is Beis HaMokad, and after that is Lechem Apanim. That's in Tamid. But in the Mishnah in Tamid, in Midos, it's different. In the Mishnah in Midos, it says that the Lechem Apanim was not in that location, it was in a different location. So now if we look back at our Gemara, says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, Mimai, how do we know that really the Lishkas Tlaim spanned the length of the wall, but was really rooted in the southwest corner? So it says the Gemara, Midiraminan Lechem Apanim Alechem Apanim, because we saw the Mishnah in Midos and the Mishnah in Tamid seemed to have had different locations for which room was the Lechem Apanim room. Umishanina, the response that we should have given to that is Amar Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, Marka Chashiv Derech Yamin, Umarka Chashiv Derech Small. Well, it's the third room after you're in room number 1, and if you're walking out to the right, which we know in the Mikdash there was a customary, it was halacha that you're supposed to do the avoda to the right. So if you're standing in the southwest quadrant and you take a right turn, so 1, 2, 3, the last room will be Lechem Apanim. But if you go to the left, it would be 1 room away. So it's really not a steer in the Mishnayos. It's just that when the location of the Lechem Apanim is in the same place according to everyone, it depends how you're walking around. If you walk right or left, how are you allowed to walk left? That's what the Gemara says here. It says Marka Chashiv Derech Yamin. One says you're leaving the Lishkas Tlaim to the right, and the other says you're leaving the Lishkas Tlaim to the left, and really the location of the Lechem Apanim are the same. And as we turn to the top of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara gives its knockout punch to prove to us that really the Lishkas Tlaim is in the southwest. If you actually agree to the text that we saw earlier, that it's Ma'aravis Dromis, that the Lishkas Tlaim is in the southwest corner, then we could understand the answer of you went to the right or you went to the left, but really it's in the same location. But if you say that the Lishkas Tlaim is in a different corner, if you say that the Lishkas Tlaim is in the northwest corner, then our answer doesn't work anymore, because then the Lechem Apanim room is not in the same location. So says the Gemara, my tirutz of the Lechem Apanim, then your answer falls away. And therefore says the Gemara, 4 lines down, Yud Zayin Amud Beis, Alav Shma Mina b'Ma'arav Yisrael Savay Shma Mina. We therefore conclude that the Lishkas Tlaim was, yes, according to this approach, a longer room. And when you came from the north, it looked like it was rooted in the southwest. And when you came from the south, it looked like the Lishkas Tlaim was rooted in the northwest, but really it was rooted in the southwest. How do we know? Because of this sophisticated answer that the Gemara gives by Lechem Apanim. The only way that we can answer the question of Lechem Apanim is under the assumption that the Lishkas Tlaim was rooted in the southwest corner. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. And then says the Gemara. That's correct. The room location is the same. So if you have four quadrants, so then let's say we're here.
They're not moving. The
Cohen's moving. The rooms are the same. So if you have down here, let's say this is the southwest room, and the avoda, the lechem apanim is here. So according to the Mishnah and Tamid, it's very far away. But according to the other Mishnah, it's just one little jump. So one went to the right. That's why it was last in his list, and one went to the left. But then the Gemara asks the practical question, which is you're not allowed to turn left in the mikdash. Halachic issues. It says the Gemara 6 lines down. Yudzayin amid beis v'amar mar kol pinot shatapone lo yihu ela derachim in the mizrach. That's not right. You always have to turn right, preferably to the east as well. Whatever, it's always to the right. But when you're starting in a particular spot, we try to make right turns. So it says the Gemara hani mili ba'avoda. That's during an actual avoda. All they're doing in these mishnayos are giving you locations. This is just architecture, layout, and geography. This is not the avoda itself. It's just describing where the room was, and therefore, who here because we're just trying to tell you what the basic location is of them. Therefore, we're not concerned about it. That brings us to the 2 dots, a third of the way down on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Says the Gemara. We learned in our Mishnah the other day, Shekohen Gadol makriv chelek barosh v'notel chelek barosh, that the Kohen Gadol always has first dibs both on food and on korbanos. Tana Rabbanan Ketzad Makriv Chelek Barosh. What does it mean that he's allowed to be Makriv first dib? Says the Gemara. Omer Ola Zani Makriv Mincha Zoani Makriv. I'm allowed to shecht whatever I want, whenever I want. I don't have to wait in line. I'm in charge. It's my house. Move over. Skip to the front of the line. You go to the theme parks and they give you the fast pass. You never have to wait. You're always allowed to be front of the line if you're the Kohen Gadol. What about Ketzad Notel Chelek Barosh? What does it mean that you're allowed to take whatever you want? We already spoke about korbanos. You can go to the front of the line. So it says the Gemara in regards to taking food. Omer chatas zo ani ochel. I can take from that chatas that you're currently bringing. Asham zeh ani ochel. I can eat whatever I want. And on Shavuos v'notel chala mishtei chalos. I can take one of the 2 chalas that are brought on Shavuos, the lechem that's brought on Shavuos, the 2 chalos. And from the lechem apanim, of which there are 12, arba o chamesh, the Kohen Gadol can take 4 or 5 of them. Mimaisa lechem apanim. From all of the 12 that are made, he can take whatever he wants. He's got a lot of latitude. So it says the Gemara, he can take 4 or 5 of the 12. Hold on one second. Rebbe Omer Machlokes in the Mishnah. L'olam chamesh. He can only take 5. There's no such thing as 4 according to Rebbe. We'll see that this is a difficult sheet in the Gemara at the top of the Amud. Shene'emar. How do I know that it's supposed to only be chamesh? Says the Gemara. 5 for Aharon and 5 for the banav, half only. Now we're going to deal with the fact that there are 12 and not 10 of the lechem apanim. So when you say half of 6, half of 12 is 5, then your math is not good. We'll see shortly how this works out. But says the Gemara, Hagufa Kasha, this poses a difficulty. What we've just learned is not so simple. Amris, first you said, Notel chala achas mishtei chalos. First you said that on Shavuos, you're allowed to take 1 of the 2. 1 out of 2, of course, is half. Money, who is that shita like? Says the Gemara, Rebbe Hida Amar Palga Shakil. There's 2, you took 1. That's the sheet of Rebbe. Rebbe just brought a pasuk to indicate that you always take half. Ema Mitziyasa, then a second later, you said the shita that Arba Chamesh Mimaisa Lechem Apanim, that you can take either 4 or 5, which is not half, and that's not Rebbe, Asan le Rabbanan. That's like the sheet of the rabbis who disagree with Rebbe. Da'amre, they say, Lo Shakil Palga, the Kohen Gadol cannot take half, he can take 4, or he can take 5, but Lav Davka that he has to take half. And then the final Marim Makom that doesn't make sense, Ema Seifa, Rabbi Omer L'olam Chamesh. No, you can only take half. So you've got a lot of different shitas going on here. It seems to be Reisha v'Seifa Rebbe. Reisha, the first case where the 2 chalas by the lechem for Shavuos, he says you can take 1. The Seifa is a case where you are going to take exactly half. And the case in the middle is where it seems to say you take 4 or 5. So that's what the Gemara asks. Reisha v'Seifa Rebbe M'tzias and Rabbanon. Everything is in one little tight mission over here. You're going to tell me that there's 2 authors. The first and last case belong to Rebbe, and the middle case is the Rabbanon. So it says the Gemara, well, not really. Amar Abaye, answer number 1. Amar Abaye, Reisha Mitziyasa Rabbanon. Really, the first and second cases are the Rabbanon. The case of the 2 chalas for Shavuos that the Kohen Gadol takes 1, and the 4 and 5 is also, that's the case in Mitziyasa. So those are also Rabbanon. How does it work out? 1 is half. If you're not supposed to give half, according to the Rabbanon, so kat the chala of the Shavuos, cut them in half. So you're not giving them a whole one. Give them 3/4 of one. So it says the Gemara, no. Modu Rabbanan beprusa de lav orachar lemeis v'lekohen gadol. It's not nice to cut one of the loaves into pieces and give the Kohen Gadol a one, what 3/4 of one of the challah. No, just give him a whole challah. Not because he needs to get half, but because cutting the challah for the Kohen Gadol is not mechubah. So when it comes to Shavuos, he always gets one out of the 2 pieces of bread. Because it's not nice to give less than one whole prusa, and that's why the Gemara concludes the way that it does. It says the Gemara, fine, but what's the case? Umay arba uchamesh, top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, top line, first words. What is the case where we have? It was the fastest blot we've done in a long time, 10 minutes. All right, this next one's not going to be 10 minutes. Umay arba uchamesh. What is the opinion in the Mishnah that says that the Kohen gets either 4 or 5 of the showbreads of the lechem apanim? So the top line says as follows: the Rabbanan de Amre. There's a separate machlokas as to the some of the rewards of being a kohen. When a mishmar would leave, they would have access to some of the lechem apanim. When a mishmar would join, when a group of kohanim would join, they would also have access to lechem apanim. So the Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, de Amre nichnas notel sheish v'yotze notel sheish, of the 12. So technically speaking, each group, the one that is nichnas, the new base of the new group of kohanim coming in, could take 6 of the showbreads. V'yotze notel sheish, and the one leaving can take 6. And the schar hagofas lasos lo shakil. We add the word shakil in with the os katan aleph that goes to the hagos sabach. And there's no payout for being the one who closes the doors. Namely, the new base av that would come in, the new mishmar that would come in, would have the task of closing the doors. Now, it's not like our doors that close. These were big, big, big doors, and they didn't have self-closing hinges. It was an avodah, but says the Gemara within the sheets of the Rabbanan, they didn't get anything extra. So meaning the ones who were going out and the ones going in get the same pay, 6 of the lechem apanim. Now, the Kohen Gadol is allowed to take whatever he wants. We said he could take 4 or 5, and he can take up to half, but the Rabbanan say not half. So batzir chada. So if you have half of 12 is 6, batzir chada, to take 1 away so that you're not actually taking half. A miflag chamesh v'shakil, then the Kohen Gadol is allowed to sweep in and take 5. The remaining 7 are split 3.5, 3.5. Or 3 and 3, however we decide. By the Kohen Gadol, we're not allowed to cut them. Maybe cut it in half. Maybe we're allowed to cut them by the regular Kohanim. Whatever the case may be, here we see the Kohen Gadol can take 5. Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Nichnat, but within this discussion about the payout of Lechem Hapanim to Kohanim that are switching shifts, we see there's a machlokas. The sheet of the Rabbanan we saw, 6 and 6, and the Kohen Gadol can swoop in and take up to 5. However, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Nichnas Notel Sheva, the one coming in, does get paid a little extra for closing the doors. Shtaim b'schar hagafas telatzos, he gets more than the average because it's hard to close the doors. V'yotze notel chamesh, so there's 12. 7 go to the incoming, they had to close the doors. 5, the remaining 5 are technically allowed to go to those who were yotze, the mishmar of kohanim that would leave. And Me'eser boy miflag. Now here it's a little different because 2 of them are going to the other group. So instead of taking a pool of 12 and the Kohen can take less than half, now the only pool that's available is up to 10. 2 of them were schar for the Kohanim who were nichnas, who closed the doors. So me'eser, 5th, 6th line, Yud Ches Amud Aleph, me'eser boy miflag batzir chada, from half of 10 is 5 minus 1, miflagav is shakil arba, and that's 4. So now we've seen, based on the machlokes of what happens when the mishmarim shift and how we pay out the Kohanim with lechem apanim, based on that we could understand the 4 and we could understand the 5. Okay, so that's a very it's hooked into this new machlokas. Again, we've done it on the surface. It's a deeper, more complex machlokas, but that's on the surface how we understand it. It says the Gemara, all of that was according to the Shita of Abaye. But remember, the question that we asked was that, hey, wait 1 second, all of these sources seem to be mishkababbled. The initial question is 3 lines from the bottom on Yud Zayin Aleph that said, Reisha v'Sefer Rebbe Yumtzias and Rabbanan. How does Rava answer that question? So Rava answers that question 6, 7 lines on Yud Ches Amud Aleph as follows: Rava Amar Kula Rebbe. Really, everything is like Rebbe that it should be half, but v'Savar like Rebbe Huda. He happens to hold like Rebbe Huda that there's a payout of an extra 2 to the mishmar that's coming in. So half of 10 is 5 minus 1 is 4. That's how you get to 4. So it says the Gemara, Belamai Arba, you got to the 4, but Hachamesh by the Mishkal. But Rebbe in the Brisa specifically said the number 5. How does he get to 5 if you hold like Rebbe Yehuda? Lokasha, Hadaika Mishmar Hamisakiv, Hadaleka Mishmar Misakiv. It depends. When Shabbos bleeds into Yontif, the Mishmar that's outgoing does not leave. They stay there until after Yontif. Under those circumstances, the rules change. So at the first of the long lines, Lokasha, this is not a contradiction. Hadaika Mishmar Misakiv, Hadaleka Mishmar Misakiv. It depends if there's an extra group of Kohanim that stick around for the rest of Yontif. And the Gemara explains how this distinction works out according to Rebbe. Ika Mishmar Misakiv, Bishmona by Lemiflag, Bishakil Arba. If in fact there's an extra mishmar there, so the Kohen will end up taking 4 from the whole bunch of 12. Ileka mishmar misakev me'atzer, ileka mishmar hamisakev. If there isn't a group of Kohanim staying, namely if it's a regular Shabbos that doesn't bleed into Yantif and they're going to finish their shift on Shabbos, then me'atzer by the miflag v'shakel chamesh. So it says the Gemara, even according to Rebbe, we could come up with a scenario by which you can either, with the Kohen Gadol, can either take 4 or 5 of the chalos. My Rebbe Omer La'olam Chamesh. Okay, that's very creative that you managed to create a scenario where Rebbe Taka holds a 4 and 5, but you violated the Mishnah, because in the Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis, 2/3 of the way down, quoted a pasuk. We said 6 lines from the bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis, Rebbe Hida Amar Pai, and then we quoted a pasuk. And the pasuk says, "V'hayisal Aronu Levanav Mechzel Aronu Mechzel Levanav." That's half in this case. So how in the world could you still say 4 according to the Shita of Rebbe? Says the Gemara Kashya. That is a great question. And therefore, again, I'm not, no psak here, but it seems to be that the approach that Rava took did not work very well, while the approach that Abaye took did work very well. And that brings us to a new Mishnah that is less complicated than the last blot of Gemara that we learned. Masrilo Zakanim, when the Kohen Gadol was preparing for Yom Kippur, for the 7 days prior, and remember how we started our Maseches, that we separate the Kohen for 7 days. During those 7 days, he was given Zakanim, he was given 2 people to learn with him, Mizikne Bezdin, 2 big Talmidei Chacham. The Kor and the fun of Beseder Yom, they'd read Psukim, they'd teach him halacha to make sure that he was, up to par, that he really knew what was going on. He was totally prepared. If you've ever read the Avoda during Musaf on Yom Kippur, then you'll know how nuanced it was. It was unbelievably detailed. So much color, so much detail. We usually are, it's a resting point for many of us during Chazaras Hashanah. But so this says the Gemara, the Omrim Lo, and they say to the Kohen Ishi, Kohen Gadol, Kra'ata b'ficha, Shema shachachta, Shema lo lamadta. Read it yourself, because it might be that you forgot it, and it might be that you never learned it. So first of all, pedagogy 101. If you want to learn something, read it yourself. It's much, much better to read it yourself. That's why there are those who say that when you're learning for learning purposes, forget about halachic purposes, you being Yotzei Talmud Torah, B'Shmiya, B'Kriya, forget about all of that. Just to remember things, you're better off reading it a little bit as you go along. So that's what they said to him. Second line of the Mishnah, quarter of the way down, maybe you forgot the halacha of Yom Kippur, and maybe you never learned it in the first place. Who would tell you a Shlemiel? He's coming in out of left field. That's the Gemara's answer. We'll get there shortly. But the Mishnah is crazy. It's an unbelievable thing to assume that there's a Kohen Gadol who's not holding. That's unbelievable. Erev Yom Kippurim on the second part of the Mishnah, 3 lines into the Mishnah. Yud Chet Samad Aleph. Erev Yom Kippurim. They take the animals and they walk them in front of him, jogging his memory of all the halachos. Remember that animal? What do we do with that? So that he's going to be totally just immersed in the halachos of and in the details of the Avodah Yom Kippurim. That's section 2 of the Mishnah. Section 3 of the Mishnah, 3 lines before the Gemara starts. He could eat whatever he wanted. He could drink whatever he wanted throughout all 7 days. However, once it got close to dark, they would not let him eat a lot, because the more you eat, the more tired you get. They weren't nervous about him falling asleep. There wasn't an isser of hesach hadas, not wearing tefillin or anything like that. But the concern was that if he would go to sleep, he might see zera, he might have a mikro laila. And if he has a mikro laila, if he sees zera, then he becomes tamei and he can't do the avodah the next day. That's a big problem. So they didn't want him to sleep that night when Yom Kippur began. They wanted him up all night. They didn't want to risk it. And the Gemara is going to speak about this in full color. But before we get there, right at the open of the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down in Chesmanat, the Gemara says, Bishlama, Shema Shachach Lechayek. Okay, sometimes people forget things. I got it. But however, Ela Shema Lo Lamad, Mimuk Minan Ki Gavna. You got the wrong guy for a very, very important job. We're looking for kapara. You got someone who's not holding in the halachos of how to do critical things. You're not talking about a menial task. You're talking about kapara for Klal Yisrael. It's a big deal. Answers the Gemara like both Michael and David have foreshadowed. Oh, let's finish the question first. Sorry. Tanya, we have a brisa that says, we said the Kohen Gadol was greater than his brothers, greater than the other Kohanim. And how does this brisa explain the greatness, the difference between the Kohen Gadol and Kohen Hedyot? Says the Gemara, he has to be stronger, he has to be better looking, he has to be wiser, which is the one that we're focusing on now. Uva Osher has to have money. In the Mishnah, the second sheet in the Mishnah says no. What it means when it says Gadol Me'echav is minayin she Imein lo, how do we know that if he doesn't have a lot of money, that his brothers will support him to make sure that he has more money? Right? You can induce the Kohen Gadol status, give him a little bit more money. Answer the Gemara, Tamalomar, you should give him more money. Nevertheless, what we see is that this is crazy. He's got to be gadol b'chachma. He's got to be greater than his brothers b'chachma. There's got to be someone who knows the halacha. So it doesn't make any sense that he should have been chosen. So the Gemara answers halfway down. We know, we learned in this Masechta a couple of blot ago, that in the second base of Mikdash, there were over 300 Kohanim Gedolim. They were dropping like flies. And what was going on there? We said that it was very bad. People were spending money. And that's what the Gemara brings right here. They were spending money to become the Kohen Gadol. Amar Rabasi, Tirkava de dinari, there was a weight in gold that was brought. Ailale, Marta Basbaitus. Marta Basbaitus brought a bribe and brought it. She brought it liyanai malka ad de ukme liyoshua ben Gamla b'kanei rabbe until they made him the Kohen Gadol. So she was bribing people so that Yoshua ben Gamla could become the Kohen Gadol. So who says he's the biggest Talmid Chacham? He paid in. He just paid. It was the money went to the highest bidder. So he became the Kohen Gadol. So that's by the second base of Mikdash. By the first base of Mikdash, it's never happened. By the first base of Mikdash, every Kohen Gadol who was there was a Talmid Chacham Nifla. But by the second Beit HaMikdash, there were scenarios where people did not know what they were talking about. 2 dots halfway down. Erev Yom Kippurim Shacharis. So the Gemara says that not only did they bring certain animals by him, but Tana Afa Seirim. They would even bring a Seir. But Tana done my time Lotani Seirim. Why didn't our Mishnah include in the list of animals that they would parade before the Kohen Gadol? Why didn't they include Seirim? So the Gemara answers, Kevan da al Chet Kasu, because a Seir is going to be brought on a Chet, al Shadaite. Where we were afraid that the Kohen would just be like broken about it and he would not do a good job in his avodah. We know that a chatas is brought from a par. Well, a chatas is brought, so my nafkamina between that and the seir. Then you shouldn't bring a par either? Answers the Gemara, par. When it comes to a cow, because the par is representative of him and his brothers who are kohanim. If there was a particular person, the Ispe Milsa, who had done something wrong, made a yadale, the Kohen Gadol would have known that one of the kohanim had done something wrong, then he can go over to him and say, you need to do tshuva. It was practical. It was right in front of him. The people who he was getting kapara for were in the room. So you can go over and say, listen, Tzaddik, I know you're struggling, but you gotta get yourself into shape. We've got the avodah to do for Yom Kippur. However, Bekulhu Yisrael lo yada, but he would never be able to do that for all of Klal Yisrael. So that's why the par is included in the seir, was excluded by our Mishnah. This is as people say, if the son of your sister is an officer, if they are a police officer, don't walk past them. They're going to be sticklers for the rules, and they know you better than they know everybody else. Okay, 2 dots, 2/3 of the way down. Says the Gemara. He was allowed to eat for as much as he wanted throughout the 7 days prior to the Avodah Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Nukusa Omer They would give him certain kinds of flour. Solis is a very fine flour. Baked him eggs in order to loosen up his stomach so that he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom as much on Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, if that's the food that you're going to feed him, all the more so, this can lead to a particular experience of arousal, which can lead to zera, and then you're causing more of a problem. And now the Gemara is going to get into some foods that you should not be feeding someone when you're trying to avoid chimum, when you're trying to avoid arousal. Tanya Simchus Amar Mishum Reb Meir Ein Ma'achilin Asolo Abi Ve'amri Lalo Abavi V'yesh Omrim Af Lo Yain Lavan. Of course, these are acronyms. What do Abi and Abavi mean? Says the Gemara, Lo Abi Aleph Beitz Yud Lo Esrog Lo Beitzim V'Lo Yain Yoshan. That's Aleph Beit Yud. Esrog Beitzim Yain Yoshan. The Amri Lo Abavi. What does Aleph Beis Beis Yud stand for? Lo Esrog V'Lo Beitzim V'Lo Basar Shamein V'Lo Yain Yoshan. So again, not an esrog and not eggs and not fatty meats and not wine. V'yesh Omer Ma'af Lo Yain Lavan Mipnei Shayayin Lavan Maybe It's Adam Lidei Tuma. That alone could bring a person to Tuma. Why doesn't it say the same language as it said before that? Maybe okay, good question. But nevertheless, it's referring to the same thing, which is Shechva Zera. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbi thought a Zav told him, if a person became a Zav, we usually assume that it's because of their overeating, the Cholmine Machal, and because of what they ate. Volume, it's quantity and quality. If you ate too much, that could be a problem. And if you ate certain foods like we saw Abavi and Abi and Abavi and certain wines, they can cause for this problem. 5 lines from the bottom, Yeches Manaf, the Gemara continues, Elaz ben Pinchas, Omer Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Ein Ma'achilin Oso, Lo Chagavi, V'Lo Gabam, So when it comes to this zav, he shouldn't eat any of these foods based on these acronyms. What are these acronyms? The Gemara then details what they are. Lo chagavi, what's the ches gimel beis yud? Lo chelev, lo chalav, excuse me, lo gvina, lo beitza, lo yain. That's our chagavi. It's chalav, gvina, beitza, and yain. Lo gabam, what does that stand for? Megris and shalpul, the liquids from beans. Ubasar shamein, that's the beis, gabam. And the mem is b'marias, that's fats from fish. That doesn't sound very appealing, but these were some of the things that they were concerned about. That were maybe lidei tuma, that were maybe lidei chimum, that could have been a cause for a zav discharge. So we would try to avoid those as well. Below kol advarim hamevin, and then you added the line below. You couldn't feed him kol advarim hamevin lidei tuma lasuye mai. When you said that general line of you can't give him anything that creates for tuma, what does that come to include? Answers the Gemara. Lasuye hadatana rabbanan, to include another brisa. What does the brisa say? There are 5 things that lead a person to become tameh. Here's what they are: shum, garlic. Turning to the topic of that's chres, the halag logos, which is a type of herb, the habetim, eggs, the hagargir, which is referred to in English as rocket. No idea what that is, but if you look on the side here, it says aruga in Rashi on the top line. It calls it aruga. And if you look at the notes here at the bottom, it says rocket. It's a flower that has white or gold. Olav they have very long and strange types of leaves. So some type of food that had a mustardy type of flavor, and it looked kind of colorful, and its leaves were long and strange. Okay, let's learn a little bit more about this gargir. When the pasuk says that he went out to collect oros, it was talking about gargir, it was talking about raket, this mustard flavor type of thing. Oros. Why was it called oros? Answers the Gemara, it would make your eyes shine bright, maybe make your eyes healthier, or literally shine bright. Fine. 4 lines down, Yud Chesim and Beis. Amar Rav Huna, gargir, hamotzi or hamotze. Gargir, one who's able to ingest gargir, great. You can eat it, great. And if not, at least you should wash it over your eyes. Just run it over your eyes. Apparently, it was very good for the eyes. Amar Papa, that wasn't always true. It was only true by gargira mitzar na'a, from the word meitzar, from the word border. It was only true if it was grown on the border of a field. So Rashi here explains that the reason why we're only talking about the border is because it wasn't depleted from other plants drawing from the nutrients in the dirt. So if it's on the border, it's not surrounded on all sides by other flowers. You're in the middle of the field, you're surrounded on all sides, so it's not going to have as many nutrients. That was at least the assumption of the Gemara. We're right now at 6 lines down or so, 7 lines down. If a person's a guest in someone's house, they should not be eating eggs. And you should not sleep. This is talking about undressed and using a blanket of the balabais, because it's possible that they may see zera if a person doesn't make her laila, and it's a busha. When Rav would travel, ki mikla the darshish machriz man havaya leyoma. When Rav would travel, he would say, "Who is going to be interested in being my wife for the day?" Rav Nachman kad mikla l'shech netziv machriz man havaya leyoma. Same thing. So the Gemara says, "What do you mean? A wife in these cities? That something's wrong with that." Tanya, the Brisa writes 1/3 of the way down. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer lo yisa adam isha b'medina v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina cheres. You should not have wives in different locations, because Shema yizdavgu zeitzal zev and imsaach no se achoso. Because let's say that in city 1 you have a wife and you have a child, city 2 you have a wife and you have a child, but they don't know each other. Who says they aren't going to get married? And then umamale kol olam kulam mamzeros, and then they're going to have children together, but that's totally not allowed, and that can lead to mamzeros. That's not allowed. Says the Gemara, answer number 1, Amre, they said, Rabbanon, Kala Islu, when a person's father is a chashuv rav, everybody knows about it. So you'll never make such a mistake. The Amar Rava, but another problem was Tiva'uha linaseh v'nispaisa. Let's say that a person, Tiva'uha linaseh, you ask someone to marry you v'nispaisa, and she agrees. It generates such a strong emotion that we're afraid that she actually had some dam leave the cervix. It's called dam chimud. In the Gemara, there's sugyas about this. If a woman sees dam chimud, every time she has tashmish amita, 3 times she has to get divorced, because we assume that the trigger, based on the halachos of chazaka, if the tashmish amita led to bleeding 3 times, there's a chazaka that she'll bleed again, which means that there's tashmish amita with a nida. Big problem. So if God forbid someone were to have these, today we have a lot more control with medications to control bleeding, etc. But back in the day, it was the end of a chuppah, it was the end of a marriage. If they had tashmish 3 times followed by blood immediately, it was a big problem. Anyways, the Gemara says that There was a bigger problem. Rava says when Rav would go to town, this would happen. If he proposed on the spot, he'd have to wait a week to marry her because that whole week she has to wait Sheva Nakim. Because of Dam Chimud, we're afraid, we're concerned that her body would have expelled a little bit of blood, and we may not have seen it. Dam Mivla Bala, maybe we didn't see it come out of the body, but we assumed that she would then be a nida. So that says the Rabbanan. This says the Gemara. No, Rabbanan odu havu modeu luhu mekadem havu mekadme umishadre shlucha. They would tell the city in 10 days, Rav is coming to town, and the other Rav who was traveling there, same exact idea. Rav Nachman is coming to town, and then they would do all the research then, and the woman would agree to become a wife, and then great, everyone was happy, and then she would wait her Sheva Nakim and all as well. Or you can say, they did get married, but they didn't have Tashma Shamita during that week. Here the Gemara lays down a critical psychology, one that is used frequently in the world of Hilchos Nida, that the fact that he's married and the fact that he knows that within a week's time that he could be intimate, this is called pas pesalo. And the pas pesalo literally, it translates as bread in the basket. It's of course a metaphor, just to explain that when one knows that they have food, then they don't starve as much. When one knows that they have access, that one has an opportunity for tashma shamita in a week's time, so they're more calm about things. And that's what the Gemara says, she'eno dome, pas pesalo, you can't compare a person who knows that he has a wife even if she's a nida, versus one who doesn't have access at all. And that's what the Gemara says here. And they never had Tashma Shamita, just they got married and they were able to live in the same house in theory, conceptually. Raises a little bit of a shaila, which is that when a couple gets married, if it's a chupas nida, for example, you're not allowed to live in the same house. There is an Isser Yichud. So this Gemara is a little bit complicated, but for another time. We're going to stop right here at this Mishnah. Tomorrow night at 8:40 at the Lag BaOmer celebration at Mark's house, we're going to learn Daf Yud Testament Aleph, and then we will be caught up through Thursday night. And then on Shabbos, we'll learn Yud Testament Beis and Daf Kaf. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
We'll be learning at the bonfire.
Bonfire, 8:40.
In the house?
I'm not sure yet. We'll have to see.
It can't be outside, it'll be too noisy.
Yeah, we'll see. Whatever the best place is, we'll do. Have a good night, everybody.